Stop! There's two of them talking.
Views and opinions are not necessarily that of John Strange, host, guest, and affiliated.
You have everything. They're just balls of light, of light, of light, of light. There's a ghost there.
All right, broadcasting live from the Napa Valley wine country, just outside the mystical Sonoma Mountains. This is Beyond the Strange. Hello, everyone. Streaming live on the Strange Days Media Digital Network. I'm your host, Dave Cruz, and thank you all for joining us tonight. It is Monday, November 1st, 2021, the year of our Lord. Back to the paranormal for tonight for sure, and we have a great show for you tonight. Tonight, we have Nathaniel Gillis, Demonologist, and we got so much to cover tonight. But first, please go to beyondthestrange.com to register and get your free monthly newsletter to stay in the know for the show. Also, you can follow me on Twitter at StrangeDave70, and you can also follow Russ at BSkyParanormal, and we'll get into more of that in a little bit later. Also, follow Beyond the Strange Facebook page, and please go to the Beyonders Crew group where Russ Bailey is the admin on the Facebook page. There's also a MeWe Beyond the Strange Beyonders group, so you might want to check that out if you don't do the Facebook thing. And also, please join the official Beyond the Strange Discord channel. It is the official Beyond the Strange chat room. It's called the Strange Chat, of all things. Imagine that. So please do that. And also make sure you go to YouTube and Twitch, hit that like and follow button, please, so that you can get your alerts for the new shows. And really quick, upcoming guests are Peter Mewis, Jim Hunt, and we got many more coming from the ether, I guess. But no, we have wonderful guests coming. They're all new guests, and it's gonna be fantastic. So just get ready for that. So with that, we'll go ahead and I'll turn the show over to Russ Bailey. So thank you, Russ Bailey, for joining us and for hosting the show tonight with Nathaniel Gillis.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Dave. Good evening, everyone. So let's jump right into this, and we'll go ahead and read Nathaniel's bio. So Nathaniel Gillis is a religious demonologist and author. After living in a haunted house, Nathaniel spent 20 years researching what it was he encountered. Nathaniel is the founder of the Preternatural Epiphenomenal Philosophy. I think I said that right. Nathaniel has sought to redefine the nature of haunting phenomena, ghosts, and high strangeness. He's often quoted for his concept of the demonic. The reason they are playing by different rules is because they are playing a different game. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please welcome, give a warm welcome to Nathaniel Gillis. Welcome, Nathaniel. What's up, man?
What's going on, brother? How you doing, man? It's an honor to be with you guys.
I'm doing great. Thanks for joining us tonight, man. Was watching one of your videos earlier, man. Pretty creepy stuff. So let's jump right into this, man. How old were you when you first had your first paranormal experience?
Man, I was 8 years old when my parents took me to an open house to potentially buy the house, obviously, but they took me in, they showed me what would be my room in the future. And my dad told me, take a look around, figure out where you're going to put your Sega and your bed. I'm going to step out in the kitchen with your mother and the realtor. And as I'm poking around, I felt led to, for some reason, to this day, I don't know why, but I crawled on my hands and knees and I pulled up the blanket underneath the bed that was in the room. And I was met face to face with a full-bodied apparition. She looked like, it was a little girl about maybe six years old, beautiful though. She had pale skin, long flowing black hair. But that was my very first encounter with the paranormal phenomenon. But that was my introduction, I should say. Not even an encounter; it was a confrontation. So once we moved into the house, the entity mutated. It was no longer just a little girl; it was something demonic, malevolent. So that was my first experience of the paranormal.
Wow. So how long did you stay in this house?
I think it was about 6 years.
Wow.
6 years there, and yeah, man. I mean, we're talking about. Like I would go to bed at night and you could feel this entity when it would walk into the room. It was heavy, it was thick, kind of like the spirits we were talking about before the show started. It was almost tangible. But it would also, like whenever it would manifest, it would also have a rancid stench of decomposition. It smelled like a dead body. And so then, I mean, like I said, it kept evolving until finally it kind of came to a climax to where like I would have the same nightmare of someone committing suicide every night. I would go to bed, I would wake up a cold sweat. The entity would be in the room. So it was a very interesting time of my life. I'm thankful I survived, because there's a lot of people out there that, I mean, literally, we're talking about stuff that makes people really lose a lot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Almost lose their minds in a sense. So I'm glad I survived it. But it was a fascinating time of my life.
Yeah, well, encounters with demons, I mean, it can kill you.
Yes, people don't believe that, but I agree, they can.
I 100%
Absolutely.
believe that. So when you were growing up, did you feel different because of what you experienced with your peers and everything?
Yeah, I did. I felt somewhat alienated. I mean, it wasn't just because of what I experienced, but it was also because what I experienced did not fit the blueprint of demonology that my local church had given me. So I grew up in evangelical Christianity. It was called Pentecostalism. It's a very strict sect of Christianity. And, I mean, I'm going to bed at night. Yeah, man. That's, I'm going to bed at night seeing shadow figures. What's that? Yeah. And, so they qualified everything as, essentially demonic. It's horns and hooves, no matter what it is. If it's negative, if you interpret it as negative, it's a demon.
Yeah.
And what I started realizing, guys, is that, not everything that we're encountering is demonic. And also that demonology as a field needs to stretch itself into new dimensions of thought, because we are encountering manifestations that don't fit in their blueprint. And so I was confronted with two decisions to make. Do I sit there and hold on to dogma? Or do I allow myself to grow out of it and then grow into new revelations, and evolve into this field? But that was my introduction to it, and it took me a while. I mean, even like to this point now, there's still people that I grew up with in church that frown on my research. One individual actually told me that I worship demons, because they don't know the English language. Like I'm just, you know what I mean? Like this is, it's clear, man. And I told him, I said, if demonologists worship demons, then does an oncologist worship cancer? Like you have to treat them like that. And I'm not trying to be rude or anything, but you have to literally break it down into pieces so they can get it and understand it. Or else they're just going to lump you in as a heretic and try to burn you at the stake. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I always, I grew up in church also, obviously. Yeah. But and the Bible, I believe what the Bible says 100%. But it's hard to read sometimes. It's hard to understand. So that's why I do a lot of my research, so I can delve further into it. Right. Now, when you were in this house and, dealing with the demons and the shadow figures and everything, did you ever experience what they call sleep paralysis?
I didn't. And you know what? Even if I don't remember being paralyzed by the fear in the sense of that I lost control, It was more in the sense that I was so scared I didn't want to move. You know what I mean? It wasn't like they pressed pause on me. It was like I'm pausing myself because I don't know what's in here with me. But yeah, I mean, you know, there would be a smoky apparition that would kind of weave itself into the corner of the room and then manifests a black cloud. But you know, I lived with it. I tell people all the time that when I took a shower, it was in the shower with me. You know, when I went to bed, it was with me. And so when I was growing up in that atmosphere, of course I felt alienated. I slipped into depression. There were days when, not even days, months where I would have to sleep with a light on, or sometimes I wouldn't sleep at all. I would not go to sleep until the sun came up. So I would grab maybe 45 minutes to an hour of sleep period before I went to school. And it was just a nightmare of a pattern. But, you know, once I got out of that, the house, I started to mature and ask some very important questions about my experiences. First of all, I wasn't crazy. And I started, you know, researching it, getting into the literature. And so that's why, like, I kind of let go of the Christianized version of demonology, even Catholic and Catholicism, and started to embrace other forms and ideas. But that's what really led me to where I am today. And, you know, that's why I'm on the show.
Yeah. So did this demon follow you outside of your house?
One time it did. Now that I went and spent the night at a friend's house. And I remember it was funny because we were like 9 years old. But so I was sleeping in his bed while he was sleeping in his mother's bed. She was a single mom. He was sleeping in her bed right across the hallway. So I could see them in the bed, right? I'm sitting there, and you know, I could see them. They're sleeping. I couldn't sleep because it was, you know, I never could sleep at nighttime. I didn't want it to see me sleeping. But all of a sudden I heard something, it began to walk up the stairs. And I'm sitting there bawling because I realized, oh my God, I can't get away from it. You know what I mean? It was that right there was a paralyzing fear for sure.
You know, my paranormal team, Black Sky Paranormal, we did a residential investigation over the summer, which I saw CMJ in the Twitch chat. What's up, Carl? He's a fellow member of Black Sky Paranormal, and great to see everybody else out there tonight. Yep. Glad you could join us. But you know, we encountered a house that had an infestation, and it's not a good feeling when you have that, because you could feel the pressure all around you. Now, I'm sure you've experienced a lot of, you know, issues like that, or demons and everything. But what are some of your most alarming cases that you've experienced?
Okay, so the most alarming case that I've had in my career is a murder case. And one day I was out to dinner and someone had private messaged me. See, my dad's a pastor. And so they felt that I was him, and they were just requesting prayer. Can you come and pray for our family? Our family's really going through something. So I looked at how far out they were from my house, and I thought, you know what? I talked to my dad and I said, man, they're claiming they're having paranormal activity. He's like, well, that's kind of your thing. You know, you go ahead and take care of that. I'll, you know, if you need my help, I'll take care of it. I said, okay, fine, whatever. So I get to the house, and I promise you, I had no idea that there was a murder that occurred there. There was no really historical context to it. They just said, we need prayer. And I thought, okay. So I was going in blind, basically.
Yeah.
So I get in there. When I walk in, I notice that there is a piece of carpet about this big. Where's the camera? About that big, cut out of the floor. And I'm looking around, and I'm like, okay, this is very strange. You could feel, like I said, it's a heaviness. It felt like consciousness was in the building. Like you could feel it. There was somebody there. I just couldn't see them. They were invisible to me. So I sit down with the family, and they actually tell me what happened. They said that they had a 13-year-old daughter, and the daughter was getting really close to an older girl at school. The older girl at school had major issues. She was playing with Ouija boards and different stuff like that. I'm not saying that constitutes issues, but in this context, it did very much so. So the father told the little girl, he's like, listen, I don't want you hanging out with her. Every time I talk to her, I get this really weird vibe, and I just feel like she's bad news. Well, the little girl, 13-year-old girl, didn't obey him. She's like, you know what? Forget that. So she started creating a relationship with this other girl. It was a friendship. And so one night they're watching TV at like 2 a.m, and they look out the window, and there's the 15-year-old girl staring at them through the window,
Hmm.
trying to intimidate them. So next thing you know, the 15-year-old girl had convinced the 13-year-old girl to try to murder her family. And so the father told me, he said, man, he said, then it's like about two or 3 months later, we're sitting down and watching TV at the same time of night. It's a school night. So my daughter walks down the stairs, opens the door for the 15-year-old. And he said, then the 15-year-old walks in with a disembodied male voice coming out of her, starts screaming and laughing and trying to kill everybody. There was one victim. It was the mother. She died in the event. So when I went there, I had no idea this is what I was walking into. I could feel evil there. Oh my God, it was evil. Whatever it was wanted to kill me. And I remember telling the family, I said, look, I said, I'm going to go through the house. I said, I'm going to have my audio recorder here. I'm going to bring one family member with me. And I said, no matter what, I don't want the family member to give me any context, because I'm going to be pointing out spirits and what I feel in the house. And then when we're done, we'll sit down and you'll tell me if I hit or missed. You know what I mean? I want to know, give me the context to what I'm seeing. So I go upstairs and we're going through different rooms, and I look into this one room, and it was like a storage area. They had a bed there, a couple other exercise bikes and all that stuff. They put all their storage in there. And when I went in there, I could feel the entity so strong. I kid you not. I literally thought that there was going to be a person hiding in there. Like it was that personal, like it was that confrontational. I'm thinking, okay, there's somebody in here waiting for us. Who is he? They're playing a prank. But that was how strong it was. So we go to a closet. I look down, and there is a milk carton full of green model trains. And I look at the family member and I say, okay, whatever entity this is, whoever it is, I said, it's attached to this closet. It's attached to this box of trains. I said, it either belonged to this entity in life, or it reminds him of his past life, which is very interesting. So we finally get downstairs, and we go to the kitchen, and I'm looking around the kitchen, and also I step into this vision. I see the victim, the wife. I saw her sitting at a table. The table was actually there. The chair wasn't, and obviously she wasn't, but she was sitting on the chair. I saw, smoking a cigarette, listening to music. And I thought, okay, why is she showing me that? It's really strange. So then we go into the living room, and we all sit down, and we start discussing things. And I said, okay, I do feel like there is I called him Jerry at first. I said, but I do feel like it's a brother of the husband. I said, I feel like it's your brother. And I just started crying. And he said, well, I do have a brother that recently died of cancer. And he said, every time we would talk to him, he would just bawl his eyes out. He would cry a lot. And I said, okay. I said, was it Jerry? He said, you're one letter off. I said, it's Gary. He said, yes. I said, okay. So I feel him hugging me. So we went through that kind of a little bit. But as we're starting to talk, I said, there's a male entity here that hates me. I said, it most likely beat his wife. He's very angry with me, and he's telling me that that he wants to kill me. Yes. And I said, whoever this entity, because I always usually feel him on the right side, very strong. When he manifested, the room changed to a heat. It got very, very, very hot. And so as we're talking, I said, tell me a little bit about your wife. She said, well, my wife's father was a drug addict and an alcoholic. He was a part of a motorcycle gang. And he said, matter of fact, he said, my wife was like 15 or something years old, younger than him. And he said, it wasn't that, like she was my daughter or anything. She's like, no, we fell in love. He's like, but there were times when he would beat her. Her father would beat her unconscious. He said, so finally one night I pulled up to her house and I got all of her stuff I could, got her in my car. And I said, listen, you're going to be with me. I'm going to take care of you. You can't deal with this. He's going to kill you.
Yeah.
So she went to therapy for 10 years for PTSD. And then all of this happens. So when we started diving into it, he said, it's actually kind of funny that you mention him and why you feel, so he's like, I'm pretty confident it's him. I said, really? And he's like, yeah. I said, okay. I said, so here's the evidence I have. This is what I felt upstairs. He said, yeah, it's strange. He said, whenever he would go into these drunken rages, he said, my mother-in-law would, this is nuts, guys, this is crazy, would put him into the car like a child, take him into the toy store, and buy him green model trains. Mm-hmm. I'm like, what? So then the other family members, her mouth, she's like shocked. She goes, okay. She goes, that wasn't the closet that Nathan pointed out. He goes, yeah, we threw all of this stuff in that room. He said, Matter of fact, Nate, it's kind of funny that you mentioned that wooden table in the kitchen, because he made that table. And also the wooden chair that you saw, we actually have that in the storage outside the garage. So that's how I identified who this was. Now, again, this is what really changed my perspective of what demonology is, what we're dealing with. This was not Haunted Hooves. This was almost a mutated form of discorporate, disincarnate consciousness that, like I said, it mutated into something that was more malevolent than he could have ever been in life. But what I did is I did the cleansing. And as I did the cleansing, you could feel the atmosphere get, I'm talking hot, to the point where the husband is shaking. He's on the couch, he's shaking, and he's rubbing his arms. He goes, oh my God. He goes, I feel like I'm burning. I feel like I'm burning. There was an atheist that was very interesting too. When I first got there, his best friend, the atheist, walked up to me and said, I don't believe in what you're doing. I don't believe in God. I don't believe in demons. I don't believe this is real. I'm only here for him. During the cleansing, he balled up in the corner of the room and just began to shake as he wept uncontrollably. It was wild. When the cleansing was done, it was almost as if someone slowly turned a light on in the house, to the point that when I had like the audio recorder, there's one of the girls that was there, she freaked out. She said, oh my God. She said, something has left this house. She said, just in case it's just me, I'm going to go upstairs. Or, just in case it's the first level, I'm going to go upstairs and see if it's the same way. And it was. Now, what's fascinating about that is about 2 or 3 months after that, I was sitting in the same location, the same restaurant, in the same chair as I was when I got the message. I'm sitting there. There's a couple that sits down next to me. It was a husband and a wife. The husband's in between me and the wife. He starts looking at what I'm reading. He asks me what I'm reading. The wife looks and says, well, you know what? Why don't we switch seats? I have a couple questions to ask them. So I start talking to her and everything. And she's like, well, what kind of cases have you had recently? Obviously, I didn't mention any names, whatever that. But I told her. She said, well, she goes, I know who you are. I've heard of you. She's like, but I'm not really comfortable telling you how I know you. And I'm like, well, now that you kind of hinted at it, you know what I mean? You've got to tell me. That's wrong. You can't just do that and throw it out there and leave. So finally, in about 45 minutes of talking to her, she said, I'm the caseworker that's been working with these 2 minors. She said, matter of fact, she said, the night that you did the cleansing, the entity came to her jail cell and told her, I can no longer stay with you. I no longer have authority.
Yeah.
Wow.
Hand to God that happened. I couldn't believe it. I was like, what? She goes, yeah. She said, we know who you are. We've heard what happened with the family. She's like, we can't explain it, obviously. She said, but that entity left her alone. But again, this began to cause me to question what I was taught. Are these actually, are these fallen angels? And if they are, we have to define these terms, right? What do you mean by fallen? How does an angel fall? Is it some kind of geographical thing? Boom, and what's an angel? What was an angel in Mesopotamian culture? Well, what were these terms before I got it as a kid? What did they mean prior to the dogmatists who used it to promote their own religions? And, so that's when I started asking these bigger questions. And in my research, I promise you guys, I lean more towards the fact that these entities that we call demons are disincarnate people. I believe that because the possession cases that we have throughout history say that. Number one, you do not have demons until you have death.
Right.
So, and that's really, that was my first step into understanding this phenomenon. And then recently, in the last year or two, I kind of took everything that I learned, and then I started diving into how demonology relates to the UFO abduction phenomenon, and how maybe people are confusing, demons with aliens and aliens with demons. And I think the truth lies somewhere in between. So that's been my journey, guys. It's been tough.
So a quick question, Nathaniel. I wanted to, I have a couple of questions from the YouTube chat from Sarah Yusuf. Thank you for joining us, Sarah. Ron J is also in there. And Amanda from Down Under, she's also on the YouTube. Thank you for joining us, as well as those in the Twitch chat. This is one of my questions. So you say that demons aren't fallen angels, or that's what you believe, and that these are people who have passed on and have become some kind of mutated malicious spirit
or something. Yeah.
What about the demons that we've heard of, like Pazuzu and those kind of demons that were worshipped, or were those different, or were they not demons, or were those just like, dark gods or something like that?
Well, these are names that were attributed to them by humans, right? When you get into demonology, where a lot of what we're dealing with are descriptions, not definitions. So like even Pazuzu, if you go back to Irving Finkel, he talks about Pazuzu. Pazuzu was never a demon. It originated as they would go to the artificers of metal, and they would create a piece of metal in the image of what they thought this entity would look like. But that entity was then designed to ward off demons. That's how it originated. And so in academia, they say that the yesterday's gods become tomorrow's devils. And so a lot of that is what occurred. But if we're getting into the artificers of metal, God, I can't say it. Artificers, I want to say officers. Artificers
we can say that
of metal,
too.
blacks. Yeah, man. But really what we're diving into is it's idolatry, in the sense that our ancestors believed that when a person died, that their consciousness would merge and actually possess metal. So if we're going to get into the possession phenomenon, long before they possessed actual corpses and people, we had dead people in consciousness merging with metal and possessing statues. One of those was Pazuzu. And it's also mentioned in the Old Testament when God talks about those who are deprived and do not have privilege, they seek artificers of metal. And what we're dealing with, again, it's not just relocation of consciousness, but it's replication of life. How consciousness will merge with a form. This gets very interesting. And animate that form. And now it has a vehicle of meaning in our dimension. This is why when we study apparitions, we see a lot of that occurring in hauntology.
Gotcha. Okay, so we do have a question from YouTube. Okay. This is from Sarah. Have your paranormal experiences help you develop a form of ESP, or is it just experience, like how a reporter may develop a reporter's sense?
I think it's the latter. I do believe that this is me speaking to a large portion of youth. Even when you have the empathic gift or have an even empathic nature, it's almost as if these entities will seek that out. That's what occurred to me in my experience in my house. I mean, I was seeing entities, and at the same time, I was getting messages for people. I went up to a woman, and it was at a wedding. It was my cousin's wedding. And I said, hey, I just want you to know that God wants to, strengthen the trust that you have in your marriage. I was like 9, dude. There's something, like it's crazy stuff. But come to find out, he had cheated on his wife and they were having issues. It freaked him out, it freaked him out. But later on in life, I mean, I think that because I was targeted, I think these entities wanted me to kill myself. I think they wanted me to end my own life so that they wouldn't have to deal with me later on in the future. But to answer that question specifically, I think, yes, I think that I encountered these entities, number one, because I had the ability to. I was more perceptive of them, but that also made me a target.
One more from Sarah. She says, given that the origins of the demonic are described in various holy books, if they are not true, why are they so effective?
What's effective? The exorcistic rites?
I'm thinking that's probably, the rituals, Yes.
Very good question. All right. So watch this. So let's go to Catholicism for a fleeting moment. What they've done is they have based the legitimacy of their exorcisms on the rate of success, right? And not on the reason for it. Those are two separate concepts. It can work. We might not know why. So what people have done is they've kind of said, okay, well, because it works, their teaching on it must be true. Let me back up and say this. They got their exorcistic rite from Numbers chapter 19 and verse 11. It was not horns and hooves. That exorcistic ritual came about from people who were possessed by what's called corpse pollution. Not horns and hooves, right? Still, we're still dealing with disincarnate, discorporate consciousness.
Right.
So what would happen in antiquity is you'd have someone go into a house, and even if there was not a corpse in there, they believed that the entity, the consciousness, would fill every void in that home. And so in antiquity, they called it the open vessel law. Essentially, they would go throughout the house. They would shut every door, shut every window. They would go to their jars of food, put a lid on it, because they believed that entity, this gets into possession, that entity had a desire to bleed its consciousness into every void in the house, including the voids in the people who were in the house. It's good stuff, man.
Right.
Very interesting. So then they would become possessed. They would have to present themselves to the priest. Why? It's not Catholicism, and it's certainly not horns and hooves, right? What are we dealing with? We're dealing with dead people that commandeer the consciousness of others. And so then they would perform this exorcistic rite. So that's why I brought it up in the past a second ago by saying, of course, their rate of success is good, but what is their reason for it? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? You can, that's really what I'm coming to the conclusion of lately. But again, it's nothing about the phenomenon speaks of horns and hooves. It does speak of entities dying and mutating, not evolving like good people, but mutating into something monstrous that we as mortals and embodied have to deal with. But again, not horns and hooves. And also not new life discovered, old life discovered in a new way.
Fascinating.
Yeah. We also have a question in the Twitch chat. This one comes from Carl. It says, Nathan, are demonic presences linked to swarms of flying insects? And if so, is it plague related somehow?
Death. Yes, you're dealing with corpse pollution, corpses, death, worms, right? That's what a lot of times we get in the Old Testament, we're talking about Sheol and hell, where the worm dieth not, all that stuff. Why? It's death, constant death. Not, but dealing with, especially, let's go into this. We're dealing with descriptions of demons. Let's go to Beelzebub. A lot of people bring that up and they say, okay, Lord of the Flies. That's not true, but it's not technically accurate. The more correct rendition would be the Lord of those who fly. Again, I'm telling you, man, we're getting right smack dab in the lap of the UFO abduction phenomenon, and we haven't even really dove headfirst into the nature of possession throughout centuries. But yes, now the context of flies is not just limited to the plague of death or bugs and worms and all that stuff on a corpse, but we're also dealing with the afterlife, because in Egyptology there's what's called the Ba'a soul. And it's also mentioned in the Atrahasis epic. Basically, they believe that when a person dies, their soul will fly out of their body like a bird or like a fly, flies out. Mm-hmm. This is why they would call Beelzebub the Lord of those who fly. What are they saying? He's Lord of the dead.
So could that be like UFO sightings?
Also, the entities we're encountering. Now this is very interesting. So we're dealing with the idea that the soul exists after bodily death. So also let's get back into biblical antiquity, because when we're dealing with these different Pazuzu and all that stuff, we got to realize that again, these entities, when they died, there's somehow they learned how to merge their consciousness with metal. And so in the Old Testament, the late Iron Age, we have cases, this is mind-blowing, where we see the first implant being implemented in history. It did not occur on a ship. It occurred by an idolater going out and digging up a corpse, putting it inside of his house, taking a small piece of metal, hollow implant, carving the name of an unclean spirit, in Hebrew, tuaruba, a dead person, carving that unclean spirit's name in the metal, and then implanting that metal into the body of the corpse. The consciousness of that unclean spirit would then possess that body and speak through it to the idolater.
Animate it.
Yes. So again, I do believe wholeheartedly that's why we're seeing this technology of the implant, because they've learned to merge their consciousness with metal and then implant it in abductees. Not only that, I have cases right now where there was a 12-year-old one night who had an implant. And it's an abductee, and he said that he felt the atmosphere begin to change. He said, next thing he knows, he said, I close my eyes, I open my eyes, and I'm not seeing me in my room. I'm seeing someone approaching my house. I'm seeing through their eyes.
Wow.
That's what he said. Now, this is very important, because if he's seeing through their eyes as they approach his house, then who is seeing through his?
Mm-hmm.
So we're dealing with a necromantic technology, again, that they're after preserving the ghost. Not just that, but they have the technology, I guess it's technology, but they can actually pull you out of yourself.
Kind of like astral travel.
Yes, by location.
Wow.
But and I've been harping on this because I have ADHD. So when I get on thoughts, dude, you can ask people. I can go 48 hours where I'm stuck on it. I ruminate over it. I look at every aspect of it. But let me give you a case study, and let's just see how this fits into our worldview. Betty Luca goes into her house one night. They're going to bed. Her and her husband. She goes into her room. Her husband's on the bed, on the side of the bed, putting socks on. She blinks, and next thing you know, he's in two places in the room at the same time.
Wow.
Oh.
They had paused him and pulled him out of himself. His apparition, remember when I told you the Lord of those who fly, that soul, they had peeled it from his mortal body, and his apparition is now running towards her, screaming at her. So I'm getting passionate now. We have an apocalyptic problem in our species.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're pulling people out of themselves without their permission to where they're in two places at once. Now, I would also suggest, again, this is necromantic technology. It's very much necromantic technology, and they know the soul exists. Not only that, but they can keep the body alive while pulling the soul out. Can I go deeper? This is
Yes,
good?
please.
Let's go deeper.
Yeah,
Matter of
let's do
fact,
it,
they will educate. They will educate that portion of us that is the soul. Betty Luca, countless times she would be abducted, and they're telling her soul all of these different things. Matter of fact, they put her in a ship on a chair and taught her how to fly a ship. Now, here's something interesting. She never flew a ship in body. So they were not relying on muscle memory, were they? No, they weren't. So again, what are we dealing with? We're dealing with souls here, which is quite disturbing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of at a loss of words, man. It's crazy.
It's
I mean,
this is amazing
it's
stuff.
fascinating. It's mind-boggling. I mean, but it all boils down to consciousness.
Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, I've always
It's a connection, dude.
Yeah, I've always, friends of mine, in college, we had conversation one time. He said he thought aliens were demons, and
right.
He could be right, because it's all connected.
Yeah, and I think again we have to define what a demon was to our ancestors, because we have a lot of evangelical researchers that are saying these are horns and hooves, and yet the research is not deep enough to actually ask the question, what was a fallen angel? What was that really, linguistically speaking? Where did that tradition originate? And so with a lot of people, when I do shows last week, do you think they're demons? Well, I don't think they're demons according to Catholicism's teaching, right? But if we understand what demons were to our ancestors, ghosts, then it would make a lot more sense. And so then I have to play the devil's advocate, no pun intended, and I have to answer it the best way. Do I think they're demons? Yes, but not in the way that we've been taught, right? We would, So what's also fascinating, let me give you guys a case here that's absolutely, God. Okay, let's just take it and say this. Okay, let's say you're 70 years old. You're riding your motorcycle, or not, let's say you're 20, whatever, and you're riding your motorcycle. It's an actual case that occurred. And you get in a devastating motorcycle wreck. You leave your body, you see your body, and your ghost, that part of you that floats and is out of your body, you're looking down at it. Next thing you know, you feel this magnetic force suck your spirit out. And you meet an entity that looks right in your eyes and says, okay, here's the issue. Your body is dying. Your doctors do not have the capability to put you back together again. You have two options here. You either die and we let you die, or you become our prophet and we'll put you back together again.
Oh, wow.
Right. So again, this idea of plucking souls out of bodies, it's almost as if they're educating that portion of our existence and then placing that embryo of us back into our body. I mean, it's just like they did to Betty Luca. Bob Luca rolled over one night. For some reason, he was startled, looked over to see his wife's ghost being peeled out of her body and then fly through a window and go with these entities. Now we're going to slide into another aspect of my research because it's all correlated. So sometimes it's difficult to kind of tie it all together for everybody. But one behavioral pattern that I discovered in my research was that whatever they're doing to the soul is manifesting in the body and on the skin. When Betty Luca was abducted, they took her soul out. But when she was placed back into her body, Bob Luca said he witnessed these symbols and puncture wounds and everything begin to manifest on her skin. Now, there are multiple, I mean, I'm talking dozens of abduction cases where that's occurred. But I think we also need to understand that if they understand that the soul can exist out of the body and that the soul can manifest on the skin, then we need to go to Ian Stevenson's work. Because Ian Stevenson worked with children who were Indian and spoke Japanese. And they would talk about how in the previous life they died. And then in their body now, you could see the death wound manifested on their skin. So whatever we're dealing with, whatever species of ghost we're dealing with, has a profound apocalyptic knowledge of how to pluck ghosts out of people and then how to place them back into different bodies. That mind-blowing.
Yeah, it really is. Will this ever end, do you think?
Do I? No, I don't know. I don't know how long they've been doing this. I would like to go back to the first person that ever died and ask myself who recruited him or her.
Yeah,
Right?
because I mean, you think about it. The first murder was Cain and Abel.
Right.
I mean, you've got to look and see. You've got to think there had to be some type of demonic force or some type of temptation there with
Correct.
Cain. Yeah.
Correct. I mean, even if we get back to Hasatan in the Hebrew, or Satan, what was his thing in the garden? You won't die. This is very interesting because a lot of Christians miss this because they don't know the ancient literature. Then he said, okay, you shall become like gods. Now, how do you do that? Well, according to the literature, you have to die to become a god. It's very interesting. This comes from the Atrahasis epic. In that, it's an ancient manuscript, and it says that the ghost of a man is made from the flesh of a god. So that the idea was that when you die, this apparitional quality that we all possess, that these entities are plucking out of us, that there's a constitution to that consciousness. There's a texture to it, right? There's a design to it. There's a transcendence about it. And so then now this gets back in, again, if that's the case, which I do believe it is, then we have to understand what death is and what is death, right? Is our ghosts, is that the larva part of us that when we die, we shed this dimension of existence and we evolve into something greater, or we mutate into something else? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Perfect sense.
Yeah. But getting back to this idea that what happens to the soul manifests on the skin, it wasn't just Betty Luca that experienced that. It wasn't just Ian Stevenson that discovered that. I did a show not too long ago. Well, it was probably about a year or two ago. And a gentleman contacted me and he said, my dad's a remote viewer. He's like, my dad would go in and out of his body at will. He would give messages to like celebrities and local politicians. He said one night he met his guides, but they weren't his guides. And he freaked out and he had a heart attack that night. And he said, as he got back into his body, they saw these entities began to manifest religious emblems on his chest. Soul first, body second. Right? Soul first, body second. It didn't happen until he got back into his body. So whatever we're dealing with, I mean, they're so far beyond us. It's hard to even comprehend. to pluck a person out of themselves
Yeah.
and to place them back in. It's unique.
I mean, it's definitely high technology.
Absolutely. Spirit science.
Yeah.
Definitely
Yeah.
spirit science. Guys, why don't we go ahead and just take a quick break, and then when we come back, we can get into some more with Nathaniel Gillis, and fascinating conversation, by the way. This is just amazing.
Thanks, man.
I am
Thanks,
so happy that you're here, Nathaniel, and everyone in
Thank you.
the YouTube chat. We got Blue Star Woman who just came in. Thank you for joining us, Blue Star Woman, and also Leslie. Thank you for joining us. And we're going to take a quick break, but don't go away, because we will be right back with more Nathaniel Gillis right after this. Don't go away. This is Beyond the Strange, and we'll be right back.
Hey, this is Deb, and you're listening to Dave Cruz on Beyond the Strange Radio.
I warn you, this could scare you, as the sound bothers me to listen to. It has always haunted me. What you are about to hear is very disturbing indeed. I've seen the Martians eat.
What in heaven's name is it?
I don't know. Beyond the Strange.
Have you ever looked skyward and pondered UFOs, aliens, time travel, alternate universes, and parallel dimensions? Want to explore paranormal activities, ghost hauntings, various cryptoids, such as Bigfoot, sea and lake monsters? Greetings, Beyonders. I'm author Casper Parks, and you are listening to Beyond the Strange with host Dave Cruz. Help spread the word by posting links in forums and social media. Available at Speaker.com, YouTube, and Google Hangouts.
All right, welcome back, everyone. This is Beyond the Strange. I am your host, Dave Cruz, and also Russ Bailey has been hosting as well. And tonight we are speaking with Nathaniel Gillis, who is a demonologist. Nathaniel Gillis is a religious demonologist and author. After living in a haunted house, Nathaniel spent 20 years researching what he encountered. And Nathaniel is the founder of Preternatural Epiphenomenal Philosophy. Nathaniel sought to redefine the nature of haunting phenomena, ghosts, and high strangeness. He's often quoted for his concept of the demonic. The reason they are playing by different rules is because they are playing a different game. His books include A Moment Called Man and The Skin That Crawls. And please, again, welcome to Beyond Strange. I lost my footing there for a second. Nathaniel Gillis, thank you again for joining us. Nathaniel.
Yes, sir.
Been a phenomenal first half of the show. Thank you so much. I feel like I just got a rush of information that is just amazing, and I think it's fantastic. And before I turn the reins back over to Russ Bailey, I just want to remind everyone that the call-in number, if you want to call in, and if you got a question for Nathaniel, or if you have just something you want to share very, very quickly, the phone number is 1-415-891-9083. Again, that number is 1-415-891-9083. And once again, I will go ahead and turn that back over to Mr. Russ Bailey. Russ, thank you again.
Yes, sir. So, obviously, one of my questions, Nathaniel, is what can one do to protect ourselves from these demonic possessions or infestations or whatnot, whatever they are?
Well, there's different religions that have different approaches, but I think that we need to start looking at the aspect of power that they wield. I'm going to give you a case in point. And I know this is going to rub people the wrong way in terms of, they're like, okay, well, I believe this religion and this is what, the case studies, they offer a data sample where it's largely inconsistent all over the board here. Let me give you a case that occurred in the 17th century. It was a Dibuk or Dybbuk case. You have a young man, or I won't say that, I'm just going to say a man because I know some things I can't talk about on certain radio shows, but I'm going to say it like this. He's out with his father. He's picking an apple at an orchard, and he was actually helping his dad get at these apples. He's underneath this tree. Something accosts him physically. He then runs to his dad crying, "What's going on here? I don't understand. There was something that attacked me. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it. It was a presence. It spoke to me in my ear," all this stuff. Dad didn't think anything of it, took his son home. The next day, the kid wakes up possessed by the entity that accosted him. This is why we have to start thinking like they think. And so upon investigation, he takes his young son to the exorcist, the Kabbalistic exorcist, does some interrogating in the spirit. The spirit says, "I was a predator." How about that? And when I was alive. And he said, what I do is I stalk my old crime scenes. He said, because I had attacked another person underneath that same tree in that same orchard. So again, biggest thing with me is it's hard to think like a fallen angel because we try to make them so much different than us, right? You can't really quantify what a fallen angel. Oh my God, how do you think? Well, if you start thinking of them as an immortal, then it makes a lot more sense. Start thinking of them as a serial killer almost, an IQ of 160, who they are so alien to us. And it's not just they're evil. How do we define evil, right? What is it? To them, it's not evil. To them, it's a way of life. And so I liken a demon that is sitting across from like a Jeffrey Dahmer or somebody who their interpretation of reality, it's very unique. It's so foreign to us, we would call it alien. But that's really truthfully what we're dealing with. But when we're getting into religious amulets, it gets back into my quote that we're dealing with something that's playing by different rules because they're playing by different games. Case in point, the gentleman that I had who showed me the amulets that were carved on his father's flesh, they were interreligious, right? So there was a Star of David, there was a cross, and then there was Egyptian hieroglyphs. Now, what that means is, again, we don't know the rules they're playing by right now. Because if we're looking at these religious amulets in the sense that they're exclusive to the religion they belong to. So you're not going to have an Islamic imam going in there with the Star of David, right? That's not his religion. But these entities have eclipsed that concept of religious amulet and spiritual warfare. It's almost as if they use amulets as a form of like an equation. This plus this equals this. And I think, again, that we as researchers, we need to understand how they're using them and why they're using them, and outgrow a lot of these dogmas that limit our beliefs to one corner of the world. We have rabbis that don't believe in the cross, and Christians who don't believe in Judaism. The problem is they're weaponizing our beliefs against us in ways we're not aware of yet. I mean, and let's get into Catholicism for a second. I mean, okay, if we look at the haunting in Connecticut with Carmen Snedeker had a crucifix on a door frame, and the spirit would not go through that wall into that room because of the crucifix. That's what she believed. Next day, she wakes up, the crucifix is gone, and the entity had moved into the room. Now, if it did not have the power to move into the room because the crucifix, why did it have enough power to remove it? So again, where they're playing by different rules here, and the reason they are is because they're playing a completely different game.
Call-in number tonight is 415-891-9083. Again, that's 415-891-9083. Please call in if you have any questions for our guest, Nathaniel Gillis. Fascinating subject we're dealing with tonight. So, Nathaniel, we spoke about fallen angels earlier.
Right.
What are their association with demons and the Nephilim?
Oh, man. So again, we're dealing with consciousness. I want to kind of lay down a foundation here of we need to understand what possession is to these entities. Now, possession is not defined by any one monotheistic religion. I think that they're all wrong. I think they're all right in some cases. But if we look beyond what, Catholicism, Judaism, Islamia says about it, we start to realize that there were entities that were using other people's body to exist in this dimension again. We would call that possession. Now, the first time possession arisen is very interesting. It wasn't just the afterlife phenomenon, but what happened was we had warriors that would be on an ancient battlefield. This is according to James Fraser, the Golden Bow, for all of the readers out there. He said that he's an anthropologist, but these warriors would be in battle and they would be mortally wounded, and knowing for sure that death was impending, they would dispossess their own body and then place their soul or their consciousness in someone else. We would call that possession. But it was not it wasn't solely, no pun intended, it wasn't solely relocation of consciousness, but it was replication of life. It's a very important point here, guys. It was not just them relocating their soul, but they were desiring to replicate the life they just existed in, they just had. So we need to understand that when we get into the texts of the Nephilim in Genesis 6. It's very interesting because I did a lot of research on that, and there's a lot of good evangelical researchers, but they're limited severely to a period of time. They're afraid to go beyond Genesis. They don't want to. They get stuck in the text, and it's limiting. Now, what it says in Genesis 6 is that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, and that they were fair, and went in to them, made out of them wives. And then they brought out the species. They conjured the species of entities. Very interesting. Now, when you get into the Genesis 6 narrative in the raw King James Shakespearean language, like you said, it's boring. It's hard to read, and it makes no sense. So what I had to do is I went through different manuscripts trying to grasp a better understanding of what actually happened. And here's what had happened. This is interesting, guys. I got a hold of a manuscript called the Apocryphon of John. It was preserved by Egyptian monks. It gives commentary to what occurred in the late Iron Age, in the Genesis 6 period. You ready for this, guys? It blew my mind. Because it takes the question out of the hands of these scholars. This is okay, not fallen angels, incubi spirits is what we were dealing with. It's fascinating. It says that these entities manifested to the women in the absence of their husbands, but it manifested as her husband to her. Whoa. Then it kind of primed them into a physical relationship. Now, you got to imagine this. The woman is thinking, and I've had cases of like this that are still occurring. I've had cases, one in India specifically, where the entity would come to this woman in the image of every lover she's been with, right? Still trying to get her to copulate with the entity. But in this case, the entities manifest in the image of their husbands, and then it began to assault them. Or try to groom them into a physical relationship. Now, this is very important. At the moment of conception, I'll keep it PG and Nickelodeon real quick, right? At the moment of conception, it stared into their eyes and then reversed their apparitions to what they really looked like. A very unique nuance in this research. Why would you do that, right? Because they're playing by different rules. These are ancient concepts they're dealing with. This was what's called an abstractic tradition. They believed that whatever man the woman was focused upon at the moment of insemination, she would birth the material physical image of through her womb as a child. So what do we have here, right? We have an apparition who wants a body that looks like its ghost. So it creates a species of children. Oh, right? And then now they step into the skin of the child and they exist, they possess it. Now it's born among us, born in this dimension by being born through the womb. Now, this is important. Because I'm telling you, the key to all understanding this entire thing is what possession is, what role it plays. Possession is pregnancy to these entities.
Mm-hmm.
Terrifying. God, it's terrifying.
It is.
Now, let's go deeper here. How do we know that? Because if we're going to start, like I said, unlocking these cauldrons, we have to look at possession, not just solely in the one theory and some theoretical aspect of it in one religion. We have to look at it what it is. It's replication, not relocation, replication of life. Now, that's why in the 16th century, we have the Kabbalistic take of possession, where we have the Dybbuk. It's pronounced Dibuk, but whatever, Dybbuk. The Dybbuk phenomenon specifically was about the dead being impregnated. It's about people, women, mortals being impregnated with the spirits of the disincarnate. To the point that we had cases in the 16th century where women were still going through what they were going through in Genesis 6. They would be sleeping, they would meet an entity, they think it's just a dream. Why not? It's just a dream, right? This isn't even real. Next day, they have handprints on them, they have bruises, and they're physically assaulted. And then they were possessed by the entity that just assaulted them. Now, what's fascinating about this, again, possession's pregnancy. They would go and present themselves to the Kabbalistic exorcists, and the entity would be seen curled up in their womb in the fetal position. So much so that Isaac Luria and Jaime Vital literally asked the question, which is a profundity: is possession pregnancy? Check. Moving deeper, were these individuals possessed by or pregnant with the entity that assaulted them? Can I go deeper?
Yeah.
Good.
All right. We have the woman of Demona whose own husband had died. And she encountered his spirit in a dream, became possessed by him, presented herself to the exorcists, and he's speaking through her body, and she looks like she's with child. Possession's pregnancy. We're not just dealing with a species that's creating a hybridization program. No, we are. But again, they're creating fetuses to step into. This is also why I have a book right here where we have cases of embryonic aliens who even Betty Luca was told, we create these replicas of life and step into their skin. This is why it's so dangerous. This is why, I mean, possession, I'm telling you, it unlocks this entire phenomenon. But again, we're dealing with entities that are trying to prolong their own existence by using us. In my book, Skin of Crawls, I say that they have broken our women and walked the length of their trauma into life. So our species is in trouble.
Sounds like it.
Yeah.
Really quick, Nathaniel. Again, you have you have 2 books, or do you have more than that?
I have 2 books. So the first one's A Moment Called Man, and I wrote that for empaths who are medicating the gift they're called to manifest. And so I kind of guide them through loving themselves, understanding that they're not, they're not disfigured souls or anything. They actually, there's a purpose to their pain. Second one, The Skin That Crawls, is about me detailing, like I said, the connection between ancient necromancy, the modern UFO abduction phenomenon. It's there. It's more there than I want it to be.
Right.
But I mean, we have a great deal of people that are stepping on ships. The ships themselves are alive. Why? Again, why? Right? Because back in history, they learned how to merge their consciousness with mental.
Yep.
It's alive. Anyways, I know I rambled, man, but
no. I'm looking.
Yeah.
I'm staring because I'm just like,
I'm just
the mind's wrapping around the pole. That's
Right.
what's happening here. Your website is what is your website again?
I'm redoing. I'm getting it professionally done, man. I had some kind of code, like it wasn't a really good website before, and then I let it lapse, and I was redoing it, and then I thought, man, I already have 2 social media accounts.
Been there.
Why do I need a website?
Right.
But I'm going to get it back up and running again. But I'm actually going to spend more time on it than I did in the past. But yeah, man. So if you guys want to look me up on social media, I'm the Nathaniel Gillis on Facebook and Instagram. And also, I just started my YouTube channel.
Sweet.
Same
right
thing, on. Nathaniel Gillis, man. So
yeah,
that's awesome. Right on.
Awesome.
Anything that you want to add, Russ? I know we have. I was hoping to get some phone calls. We'll put the number out there again: 1-415-891-9083. Again, that phone number is 1-415-891-9083. We have some time for a couple phone calls. If anybody wants to call in, please do. But we've got, again, we got a lot to cover, and we've learned so much. I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Russ.
Yeah. Another question from the Twitch chat. Carl says, more of a question than a comment. Can we assume if something follows someone from one location to another that it is demonic? He says, in my experience, human spirits are kind of linked to a specific location.
Well, I wouldn't say there. I mean, I'm not saying that he didn't experience that. I completely believe he experienced that. I think that in my personal experience, I've experienced entities that have attached themselves because they're familial, especially if it's suicide. I had a case of suicide where a family member had committed suicide, and then it almost laid on this girl to where she began to feel that entity's emotions, and she was going through the same behavioral patterns and the same process of depression that individual did prior to him taking his life. So I believe it's both. I do believe there are entities that are attached to homes, objects, obviously, and then there are also attachments that are like the Dibuk, where like the pictorial tradition of the Dybbuk or the Dibuk is a skeleton laying on top of somebody. So again, it's different consciousness laying on top of them. So a part of deliverance ministry is discerning, is that entity attached to you because you live here, or is there, familial attachment? I had a case where a lady had literally said she sold her soul to the devil. And when I finally got her on the phone, I started talking to the entity, and I called him Christopher. I said, I see you on the floor of the second story house. I said, I'm looking right in the room. I said, I know who you are, Christopher. started breaking out crying. She goes, yeah, that was the entity I made a covenant with. So, you know, it again, like I said, it could be location or it can be an attachment.
I got a question from YouTube. This comes from Sarah
Yeah.
once again. Given that there
Sarah's smart, dude.
She's tearing it up tonight.
Dude, I've been looking at her questions. I'm like, man, I want to answer every one of them. Yeah.
She's definitely tearing. Maybe later on you can. Given that there are variations of types of human beings, are there variations of types of possessive entities? Also,
yes.
Is there a good possession? So you can answer that first question and then answer the second.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to get into the different personalities, language preferences. Oh my gosh, memories even of these possessing entities. So in the 16th century, you had a schism in the field of demonology. While Isaac Luria was teaching his disciples that to deliver the demoniac, you have to talk to the spirit in them. Yeah. The Catholicism was out there saying, hey, listen, Satan's an actual entity and that these are all demons. We don't want anything to do with them. So if you go into the Eastern tradition, even in your Sufi traditions and Kabbalistic traditions, you are dealing with disincarnate entities that have their own language preferences. They have their own religions. They have their own memories. So you're dealing like, let's say if you're dealing with Isaac Luria, you would have cases where like one young man was murdered and possessed a person and said, I need you to pray for me. You know, it wasn't like he was trying to kill anybody or anything. He was just, I need you to pray for me. Why do I need to, because I was murdered. This is the name of the gentleman that murdered me. He has the knife in his house. This is where it's at. And so the entity actually solved his own murder. And so then the authorities went and interrogated the man, and the man freaks out and says, well, that entity, the ghost's been haunting me ever since I killed him. Here's the murder weapon. And, so we've had cases of that. Like Hayim Vital had a case where, oh, dude, it's fascinating stuff. But see how much larger it is than just.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, oh.
It is.
God.
This is fascinating stuff.
So check this out. So Hayim Vital goes to bed one night and he has a dream. And in the dream, his favorite student who had recently died comes to him and says, hey, doc, I need help. I actually called him master. Master, I need your assistance. Tomorrow I will come to you. So, the guy gets up the next day, Hayim Vital does, and he goes out, he does his flowers, waters his flowers, goes to his garden, trims his bushes and all that stuff. After a long days of work, he gets home, eats his dinner, brushes his teeth. He's thinking right now, man, must have been a fluke. Goes to bed, falls off to sleep. Next thing you know, ding dong. Right? He goes to the door, opens up his cottage, and there is a mother with her 12-year-old daughter. And the daughter looks at him and says, hello, master. I told you I would come to you today. So yes. Now, again, we are dealing with entities that have their own language preferences, their own memories, their own belief systems. So in Sufi and like the Sufi tradition and the Kabbalistic tradition, both of them are inundated with cases where the rabbi was unable to cast the entity out because the entity was Muslim. So and in that time in Safdi Israel, you had villages of Islamic people here and Muslims here. Then you had your Jews here. So they were kind of in a mix and everything. You would have the rabbi go over to the neighboring village, get an imam. We have an Arabic speaking entity here. We need you. And then the imam would start to talk to the entity and the entity would fear him. Now, this gets back to them playing by different rules because they're playing a different game. If we want to know what they have fear of, we need to understand what they have faith in. That is a key, a master key to this. And that's what Isaac Luria taught. Now, Luria was a Kabbalistic exorcist that was like basically a god among men. He was known for taking his students, like let's say if you just got to a school, he would take you to a graveyard, and he would say, he'd close his eyes, and he'd point, there's this so-and-so, and he'd give you the name. This is what the age he died of. This is how he died. This is where he's at. I mean, graveyards he'd never been to before. And they asked him one day why he had that gift, and he said, because in the book of Job, it says that man grieves over himself. And so he took it literally. And so he believed that these spirits would grieve over themselves in the grave. And so that's it, because it was fascinating stuff, man. But so yes, they do have different memories, different belief systems. and language preferences. But again, some of these were entities that hated people, like the woman of Demona. Her husband, I think he had assaulted her in life,
right,
in very disturbing ways, and he was still doing that in death, and so that's why she needed deliverance. What's going on here? I need help. So again, we're dealing with a form of the afterlife that it should, at least for serious researchers, beckon some really, really interesting questions about life after death. Why it is that there are some people that need prayer even after they die. Now, what's interesting about Sarah Yusuf had asked a question, what about these different traditions? Now, if you go into Sufism, you start to see that the Jewish demonology and angelology bleeds in to the Islamic tradition, because their interpretation of jinn, or jinnah in Arabic, is that these jinn they produce, they have their own belief systems. So it was pointing back to just people, right? They had children, they had jobs. Matter of fact, they're atheist jinn. So again, what we're dealing with are personalities, personhoods that exist after life. So I hope I answered that question. If I didn't, I'll come up with a better answer later.
Well, it was actually Sarah's question, but that second part is, has there ever really been a good possession? That's.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a serious question. I don't want to make it seem like it wasn't. It was very much serious. Good question. Mm-hmm. Now we were talking about the Yehudim in Hebrew as the good possession or an extra soul. This practice, and I personally know a man who was a minister who performed this on Bill Branham's grave. It's an act of necromancy. I don't care how we put it. These people would actually go into graveyards, lay on the grave, and then ask for the mantle of the deceased individual to possess them. And so in Hebrew, they called it Yehudim, and it was essentially you being possessed by a good person and a good soul. And oftentimes it would give that individual supernatural powers, knowledge that went beyond their existence and their years. So, you're dealing with people who would be possessed by these entities. You're dealing with deliverers, prophets, prophetesses, healers. But there are certain good possessions, at least according to the Jewish tradition.
Yeah.
Sounds great. Fascinating stuff. I got one quick mention, and then I promise I'll give it to Russ. So we have, by the way, I wanted to thank James White, one of our good friends and guests of the show. Jimmy and I talked earlier, and there was a person that and Jimmy is Native American. Is also a shaman, medicine man, person of very high stature in his tribe. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about how a lot of this, by the way, of how if a spirit can possess someone, why can't a shaman, or like you were saying, a rabbi or a priest, exorcise these demons, or a particular demon? And that's a great answer. What you were telling me is, and I kind of brought that up too, is some people would get possessed by possibly, like you said, perhaps a Middle Eastern spirit or an Asian spirit, or something that does not recognize, let's say, Jesus Christ. So if you're trying to, get rid of the spirit or get rid of the demon in the name of Jesus Christ, that demon might actually laugh, first of all, and say, "I don't know him."
We've had that We've had that happen.
That kind of thing.
Yes, sir. And what's awesome about that concept is, this really changed my life, guys. This really reframed my whole worldview. Yeah. If we're dealing with entities that have memory, we're dealing with time. We're dealing with entities that are looking back and thinking, okay, I have worldviews of my own. I have beliefs of my own. Why? Because I have experience of my own. Where'd you get those experiences out? So it points to the afterlife. But, in the context of different exorcistic rituals, we do have fumigants. We have different traditions that have worked before, but they don't work every time. And I don't think that, case in point, here we go. Father Sinistrario of Amino, he was a Franciscan priest. He was walking on a dirt road one day, and he encountered an incubus spirit, and he threw everything he had, everything he knew of, he threw out this entity. I mean, Alec Lork was speaking, right? He didn't throw a branch at it, but he threw his best work at it, and it just looked at him, just kept on walking. Like, dude, you know, and that's why he in his book Incubus Cases, he talks about how that there are pagan demons or pagan entities that they're completely immune to these different spiritual warfare things. But fascinating stuff, man.
It is.
But I mean, like, Sinistrari also had cases where these entities, again, it's the incubi, they would assault these women. He would actually collect biological excretions from these entities. Now, I'm telling you, we're bleeding right back into the UFO abduction phenomenon here. They were trying to inseminate these women. And the idea in that portion of the world and that time in history was that these entities were milking, this is according to him, milking the carcasses of their recently deceased. So they would go into the graveyards. We would call them vampires. They didn't just suck blood. They took other and harvested other secretions. But they would harvest biological substances from both living and deceased males. And then they would go to a living woman and try to inseminate them. This is what Betty and Barney Hill encountered, you know? And I mean, and what's happened is that many demonologists and even ufologists, we've trapped ourselves in language. Right. And it's sad because I think that if ufologists actually took into consideration these cases, my God, we have thousands of years of cases where, it's not I forget his name now, but it's not how, this one researcher, the abduction researcher guy, David Jacobs, it's not, these guys have only been doing that since the 60s or the 1900s. No. Again, they've been doing this for a lot longer than we would like them to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nathaniel, definitely thank you for joining us. Soon we've reached the end of the show. Definitely have to have you back on for another go round of this.
Talk to you for hours.
Yeah.
That's a good thing.
Or actually, I should say I can listen to you for hours.
Yeah, definitely.
There we
definitely.
go.
Why don't you tell everybody where we can find you and all of yours, all your books, where we can get all those at?
So my website, like I said, I'm going to be redoing it and rebranding and everything. You can find me on Instagram and I'm even on LinkedIn. So Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, the Nathaniel Gillis. And A Moment Called Man is on Amazon. And then once I get Skin It Crawls out for everybody, it'll be on Amazon too. And then once I get that out, I want to make it into a movie, so we can actually start seeing these actual cases of demonic possession on the big screen.
Cool.
That's what I'm after. Yeah, man.
So thank you for having me on, guys. That. Yeah.
Oh, God.
Thank you so much. And again, everyone, thanks for joining us this evening. Remember, follow us at beyondthestrange.com. We'll be back next week, same bat time, bat channel. You can follow me at bsky_paranormal on Twitter. You can also reach me in the Beyonders crew on Facebook and Black Sky Paranormal on Facebook. Dave, where can they reach you at?
BeyondTheStrange.com. All links are there.
Yes, sir.
There you go.
Well, as everyone, stay strange and hasta next time, everyone. Good night.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks again, Nathaniel.
Yeah,
You're welcome, guys. You guys have a good night, man.
You too.